3 decades ago, a film hit American movie screens with the force of a detonation. No build-up, no cushioning, just an unfiltered collision with a reality most audiences had never been asked to sit inside. Menace to Society didn't offer you the comfort of distance. It put you in the middle of it. But what most people never knew was that the war being waged behind the camera was just as brutal as anything on screen. A rapper who got cut and came back with his fists. Gang members who weren't playing a role. Live rounds that brought production to a dead stop. A rating that nearly buried the film before it could breathe. And two black men, barely old enough to drink, who somehow turned every single piece of that chaos into one of the most important American films ever made. Today we go inside all of it. 28 secrets kept buried for decades that will permanently change the way you see Menace to Society. Number 1. The directors were only 20 years old. There is a detail about the making of Menace to Society that never quite loses its power, no matter how many times you encounter it. Alan and Albert Hughes, the twin brothers who directed the film, had not yet turned 21 when they finished it. They weren't old enough to legally order a drink at a bar. They were old enough to direct one of the most viscerally affecting American films of the last 50 years. The brothers had grown up in the greater Los Angeles area and built their craft directing music videos, more than 30 of them, for artists including Tupac Shakur and Tone Loc. But a music video runs 3 minutes. Menace to Society was a full-feature film, shot in some of the most dangerous streets in the country, surrounded by real gang members with a volatile cast and a studio watching every move. They didn't just get through it. They made something extraordinary. Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel both placed it on their 10 best films of 1993 lists. At 20 years old, whatever you were doing at that age, it wasn't that. I'm doing a $100 Amazon gift card giveaway to celebrate when this channel reaches 1,000 subscribers. No action required to enter. I'll randomly pick a winner once we hit the milestone. If you want to follow the journey, feel free to subscribe. Number 2. Real gang members worked the set as security and extras. When production moved into the streets of Watts, the Hughes brothers made a call that could only be described as either visionary or reckless, and probably both at once. They hired actual residents of the Jordan Downs housing projects as background actors and brought in members of the Grape Street Watts Crips to manage security on set. This was not a simulated environment. Real gang members were walking through scenes, providing an authenticity that no casting director could manufacture from scratch. If you look at the outdoor sequences carefully, the blue and purple bandanas people are wearing aren't costumes. Those are the actual colors of the streets those people lived on. The Hughes brothers had a clear philosophy. You can't fake Watts. Either you show up for real, or you don't show up at all. The film's texture, the weight of those outdoor scenes, comes directly from that decision. Number 3. The budget was $3.5 million, and it made $30 million. New Line Cinema handed the Hughes brothers $3.5 million. One account suggests the final cost may have actually been closer to $2.5 million. Against that investment, Menace to Society earned approximately $30 million worldwide, over $27 million of that from the United States and Canada alone. It opened Memorial Day weekend, 1993, in 464 theaters. The opening weekend number wasn't explosive, but the film didn't need to win the weekend. It was already a cultural eruption. Word of mouth moved through communities in a way that advertising couldn't manufacture, a return of nearly 10 times the investment, made by two 20-year-olds. From a film the studio nearly couldn't release because it was considered too violent. That math doesn't make sense until you understand what the film actually was. Number 4. The Watts riot footage at the opening is real archival film. The film doesn't open with fiction. The grainy, pixelated footage of the 1965 Watts riots that launches Menace to Society is genuine archival material, sourced from the Sherman Grinberg film libraries and credited in the end titles. The decision was deliberate and precise. This violence didn't begin with Kane. It began decades before he was born. The riots, ignited by a traffic stop in a black neighborhood and accelerated by systemic neglect that had never been properly addressed, are presented as the direct origin point from which everything else in the film flows. The Hughes brothers weren't just setting a scene, they were drawing a timeline. The pixelation wasn't a technical limitation, it was an aesthetic choice. It creates a sensation of unease and disorder that mirrors the chaos of that moment. You're not watching a clean historical record. You're watching a wound that was never allowed to heal. Number 5. Tupac Shakur was fired and then physically attacked the director. This is the story most people have heard fragments of. The full version is more extreme than the legend. When New Line Cinema agreed to finance Menace to Society, a condition came attached. Cast a prominent rapper. The Hughes brothers had worked with Tupac before, directing the video for Brenda's Got a Baby, and they cast him as Sharif, Kane's reformed Muslim friend. They already had doubts about him going in. They cast him anyway. Tupac's problem wasn't the project, it was the role. While every other rapper in the film was playing something close to their public image, Tupac was being asked to portray a quiet, devout Muslim with no explained backstory. He wanted the brothers to write in how a kid from the inner city arrives at that faith. They refused. According to MC8, every time rehearsal started, Tupac had notes. The friction turned into an impossibility. He was let go. 6 months later, when the Hughes brothers were on set shooting a music video, Tupac arrived with a group of people and a physical confrontation followed. Alan Hughes left looking, in the words of witnesses, like he had walked out of a horror film. Tupac was charged with assault and battery. At trial, a tape of him bragging about the fight on Yo MTV Raps was played as evidence. He was sentenced to 15 days in jail. Years later, Alan Hughes said something that stopped people cold. If Tupac had stayed in the film, he would have outshone everyone and thrown the whole thing off balance. Number 6. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. Before Menace to Society reached American theaters, it made its world premiere at Cannes, specifically in the director's Fortnight section, which is reserved for bold and innovative first, and second features. A film about drug dealing, gang violence, and survival in the Watts housing projects, made for $3.5 million by two black 20-year-olds, was welcomed at the most prestigious film festival in the world. The Hughes brothers walked the Cannes red carpet before most of America knew their names. That wasn't an accident, and it wasn't tokenism. The programmers at Cannes recognized something in the film that the American mainstream would take longer to fully absorb. This was a statement being made on an international stage. This film belongs alongside the most important cinema being produced anywhere in the world. Number 7. The soundtrack hit number 1 on the R&B charts. The musical architecture of Menace to Society was built as deliberately as its visual one. The soundtrack, released by Jive Records on the same day as the film, May 26, 1993, brought together some of the most essential voices in West Coast hip-hop: MC8, Spice One, Too Short, DJ Quick, and others operating at the peak of their powers. It peaked at number 11 on the Billboard 200 and climbed to number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart, where it held for 6 weeks. 6 weeks at the top. This wasn't supplementary material. The soundtrack was its own cultural event, running parallel to the film and amplifying everything it said. Menace to Society didn't just resonate visually, it hit from every direction at once. Number 8. Rival gang members shot up the set. Choosing to film in Jordan Downs, deep inside Crip territory, came with risks that no production budget could fully account for. During principal photography, members of the Hacienda Village Bloods arrived on set and opened fire. Production was shut down immediately and stayed shut for 2 days. The entire film came to a halt because the neighborhood rivalry the movie was depicting had physically entered the production itself. No one was reported killed, but the message was unmistakable. The world being recreated on screen was not a dramatization for the people who actually lived in it. When cameras came back up, every person on that set understood they weren't working in a controlled environment. They were working in the middle of a real conflict, documenting something that was still actively happening around them. Number 9. This was Jada Pinkett's theatrical film debut. Before Jada Pinkett Smith became one of Hollywood's most recognizable figures, before Set It Off, before Ally, before The Matrix Reloaded, there was Ronnie. Menace to Society was her first appearance on the theatrical big screen. She had done television work before, but this was the film that introduced her to cinema audiences. What she delivered as Ronnie, a woman pouring herself into trying to pull someone she loved away from a world that was consuming him, was a performance of quiet, devastating power. The warmth she brought to it made the film's tragedy land harder, because you understood through her exactly what was being lost. The world got Jada Pinkett as a movie actress through Menace to Society. That's not a footnote. That's a significant piece of film history. Number 10. Spice One was originally cast as Kane. Before Tyron Turner ever set foot on the Watts set, the role of Kane Lawson had already been offered to someone else. West Coast rapper Spice One, known for raw, street-level storytelling on tracks like Welcome to the Ghetto, was the Hughes brothers' original choice for the lead. The connection made practical sense. They had already directed several of his music videos and had an established working relationship. Spice One also reportedly believed he had been considered for the role of O-Dog at some point. But breakdowns in communication between him and his management created problems that couldn't be worked around, and he was released from the project. That opening brought in Tyron Turner, whose face some viewers might recognize from Janet Jackson's extended Rhythm Nation video, to deliver what critics called one of the most emotionally layered performances of the entire decade. Sometimes the wrong door closing is the only way the right one opens. Number 11. It was Lawrence Tate's feature film debut too. The same is true of the actor who played the film's most electrically dangerous character. O-Dog, coiled, impulsive, casually violent, every scene with him feeling like a wire about to snap, was Lawrence Tate's first feature film. He was from the South Side of Chicago and brought something to the role that no amount of direction could have produced artificially. Critics called his performance star-making. One reviewer described him as practically vibrating with menace, a man who made every scene feel unstable simply by being present in it. The word they kept reaching for was unpredictable. You never knew what O-Dog was going to do, and that kept every scene he appeared in on a dangerous edge. That was his first film, his very first. The performance that introduced him to the world was made before he had ever stood in front of a movie camera in a professional capacity. Number 12, Samuel L. Jackson played Kane's father in a flashback, before he was Nick Fury, before Pulp Fiction, which would also release in 1993. Samuel L. Jackson appeared in Menace to Society as Tat Lawson, Kane's father, in a brief but deeply unsettling flashback sequence. In it, the young Kane watches his father shoot and kill a man at a card game over something trivial. It is the original wound of the film, the moment where everything that follows becomes comprehensible. Jackson plays it with a chilling, almost bored casualness, as if violence at that scale is simply weather, unremarkable, routine. It burns into your memory and stays there. It was a small role by any conventional measure, but Jackson brought his complete intensity to it. And that intensity is precisely why the flashback continues to haunt the film long after everything else has faded. Number 13. A scene was cut because the actor was too gangster. Among the various sequences that didn't survive into the final cut, one stands out for a reason that borders on the absurd. A scene was removed from the finished film because the actor involved was, in the words of the production, too gangster, and had no narrative connection to the story being told around him. No names were provided, No description of what the scene contained, what it was supposed to accomplish, or why it was filmed in the first place. Just the extraordinary situation of a film about gang life in Los Angeles, having to remove someone for being too authentically embedded in that life to function as a dramatic element. It's a question the film itself keeps circling without ever fully resolving. Where exactly is the boundary between authentic portrayal and something else entirely? And who has the standing to draw that line? Number 14, Alan Hughes said Tupac would have broken the film. We return at the end to the ghost who never appeared in a single frame of the finished film, but whose presence saturates every conversation about it. In a 2013 interview with MTV News, Alan Hughes said something that reframed the entire saga. If Tupac had been in the movie, he would have outshone everyone. It would have thrown the whole axis of the film off if Tupac was in it, because he was bigger than the movie. Let that land. The director who fired Tupac, who was physically attacked by him, who pressed charges and watched him get sentenced, is saying that Tupac would have been so magnetically dominant, so electrically overwhelming, that his presence would have destabilized a film that went on to beat Schindler's List at the MTV Movie Awards and get canonized by the Criterion Collection. The conflict that began in ego, escalated into violence, and ended in a courtroom may have inadvertently protected the artistic coherence of one of the greatest American films of the 1990s. History writes irony that no screenwriter would dare put on the page. Number 15, the liquor store scene, shows the film crew in a mirror. This one is for the viewers who watch with the lights on and their eyes fully open. During the opening liquor store scene, that explosive, no-warning sequence that opens the film like a thunderclap, a camera error made it all the way into the finished cut. When O-Dog takes the Korean store owner's wife hostage, there is a ceiling mirror visible in the shot. If you look carefully at that mirror, you can see the film crew reflected in it. The people operating cameras, standing in a space that is supposed to be empty. Pause the film. Find that mirror. The fiction and the reality collapse into each other in a single frame. The movie about what's real becomes, for just a moment, visibly manufactured. And that gap, once you see it, changes the way you watch everything that follows. Number 16. The studio mandated Tupac's casting, and the directors didn't want him. Here's the dimension of the Tupac story that most people miss. According to MC8, the Hughes brothers didn't actually want Tupac in the film. They knew from their music video work together that he could be difficult on set, and they had serious reservations. But New Line Cinema embedded the requirement into the financing deal. Get a recognizable rapper with real star power attached. So the brothers did something quietly strategic. They cast Tupac in the smallest role available, Sharif, the reformed Muslim, betting that his dissatisfaction with a part so far from his public image would eventually give them a clean exit. Whether that was calculated or simply the most practical available compromise, it played out almost exactly as a reasonable person might have predicted. Tupac was frustrated from the start. The conflict escalated steadily, and eventually, he was gone. In the chess match between the studio, the directors, and one of rap's most volatile stars, nobody in that triangle came out completely clean. Number 17. Real violence was linked to the film after its release. The impact of Menace to society didn't stay inside movie theaters. After its release, in Spain, base incidents of real-world violence were directly linked to the film. The Hollywood Reporter documented multiple incidents in late 1993 and early 1994. Most disturbingly, a young man in Albuquerque, New Mexico, directly replicated the convenience store robbery from the film's opening sequence. The filmmakers had made deliberate choices to frame the violence with moral weight, pairing brutal imagery with Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, refusing to glamorize what was being depicted. They set out to make an anti-violence film, but the authenticity that made it powerful also made it dangerous in the wrong context. The line between portrayal and instruction is thinner than any filmmaker wants to confront. Number 18. Eazy-E was considered for O-Dog. The casting conversations ran deeper than most people realized. In 2023, Alan Hughes revealed that NWA legend Eazy-E had been considered at one point for the role of O-Dog, the same O-Dog that Lawrence Tate transformed into one of the most terrifying screen presences of the 1990s. According to Hughes, the conversation never moved forward because he found Eazy-E to be controlling on set. So the role that could have belonged to one of gangster rap's founding architects went instead to a young actor from Chicago's South Side, making his first feature film. It's one of the film's great alternate history questions. O-Dog, as we know him, is inseparable from Lawrence Tate's specific physical energy, that coiled, unpredictable quality that made him feel genuinely dangerous. Whether Eazy-E could have delivered anything remotely comparable is something no one will ever know. Number 19. The film was originally headed for an NC-17 rating. When Menace to Society was initially assembled and submitted to the MPAA, it came back with an NC-17, the worst possible rating for any film hoping for wide commercial release. That designation would have blocked it from most theaters and shut down virtually all advertising avenues. It would have effectively killed the film's chance of reaching the audience it was made for. The Hughes brothers and their producers went back in and surgically removed scenes of graphic gun violence to bring it down to an R. According to a Hollywood Reporter article from March 1993, the cuts were significant. Not cosmetic trims, but genuine alterations to the texture of the film. And here's what has never fully sat right with anyone who looks closely. A complete prison riot sequence was removed entirely. Not shortened, gone. Even the director's cut, which restored other previously cut material, does not include it. According to the Hughes brothers themselves, that sequence remains off the table. There are scenes from Menace to Society that no one, not even the most dedicated fans with the director's cut, has ever seen. Number 20. It beat Schindler's List and Jurassic Park at the MTV Movie Awards. In 1994, the MTV Movie Awards presented its award for Best Movie. The nominees included The Fugitive, Philadelphia, Jurassic Park, and Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg's Holocaust masterpiece that would win the Academy Award for Best Picture that same year. Menace to Society won. A film made for $3.5 million, directed by two young black men who had never made a feature before, beat some of the most celebrated films of the decade at a nationally televised awards show. It was a statement from an audience, young, diverse, culturally attuned, that understood something about the film that the more formal awards bodies were moving more slowly to absorb. The film made by people the industry had barely made room for had just beaten the industry's most honored productions in a public vote. Number 21. MC8 ad-libbed most of his lines. The menacing, unforgettable presence of AWACS in Menace to Society was not, in any conventional sense, written. MC8, the Compton rapper playing the role, improvised the majority of his dialogue, pulling from his own lived experience and the authentic language of the streets he came from. The Hughes brothers made a significant creative bet here. They handed a rapper with no formal acting training the freedom to essentially speak in his own voice and trusted that what came out would be more real than anything a script could deliver. They were right. The authenticity of AWACS is, in a very literal sense, the authenticity of MC8 himself. The character doesn't feel performed because it largely wasn't. That's the kind of creative decision that either falls apart completely or produces something that lingers in your memory for 30 years. Number 22. Twin girls with a violent storyline were cut from the script. The original screenplay included two female characters, twin girls who would have been part of Kane's circle. Their role would have involved robbery, and their inclusion would have expanded several scenes featuring Kane directly. They were written out of the script entirely before filming began. Their absence is one of the film's quiet alternate histories. Menace to Society for almost its entire runtime, is a story told from and about the male experience in South Central Los Angeles. These twin girls, had they remained, would have introduced a different lens, potentially making the film more layered in ways that might have shifted how audiences understood the world it was depicting. We'll never know what that version of the film would have looked like, but the fact that they existed in the script before being removed says something about the choices being made at every stage about whose story this was going to be told as. Number 23. The screenplay was co-written with their friend Tiger Williams. The script for Menace to Society was not solely the work of the Hughes brothers. They wrote it with their close friend Tiger Williams, a collaboration that gave the screenplay a specific emotional texture and a quality of authenticity that critics kept returning to. Williams brought personal insight to the material that rooted it beyond the purely cinematic. The dialogue in the film has a quality that was noted repeatedly. It sounds like conversations that actually happened. The slang, the cadence, the rhythms of how people talked in South Central in the early 1990s, that came from people who had lived inside those rhythms. A script written purely from the outside, even by talented writers, would have sounded like someone's idea of those conversations. The Williams collaboration made sure it sounded like the conversations themselves. Number 24, a scene had to be completely dubbed because of air traffic. In the scene where Chauncey receives information about a car to steal, featuring Clifton Powell, every single word of dialogue had to be thrown out after filming wrapped. The location sat directly under a flight path, and the aircraft noise contaminating the audio was beyond any reasonable recovery. Both actors had to return to a studio and re-record all of their dialogue in post-production. What you hear in the finished film is a reconstruction, built after the fact to match what was filmed, rather than captured live in the moment. It's one of those production details that only surfaces in deep dive research, but it reframes the scene every time you watch it. That naturalism, that sense of an overheard conversation, entirely engineered after the camera had already stopped rolling. Number 25, MC Ren turned down the role of AWACS to join the Nation of Islam. Before MC8 stepped into the role of AWACS, it had already been offered to and accepted by someone else. MC Ren, the notoriously underrated lyricist from NWA, was locked in to play the character. Then, in late 1992, he converted to the Nation of Islam and turned the part down. His new faith led him away from a project built around the violence he had once made his name rapping about. That created the opening for MC8 to step in from Compton and make the role entirely his own. And there's a structural detail worth noting. The studio had actually mandated that a platinum rapper be cast in the film. MC8's arrival wasn't coincidental. It was a contractual requirement built into the deal with New Line Cinema. Ren's departure, rooted in personal conviction, handed MC8 one of the defining roles in 1990s cinema. And MC8, drawing almost entirely from his own lived experience, delivered something that felt less like a performance and more like a testimony. Number 26. The Criterion Collection released the director's cut on Laserdisc in 1994. In January 1994, just months after Menace to Society's theatrical release, the Criterion Collection put out the director's cut on Laserdisc. The Criterion Collection, dedicated to preserving the most important films in cinema history in definitive editions, recognized the Hughes brothers' debut as worthy of that treatment almost immediately after it was released. This was one of Criterion's first major releases of a contemporary African-American film in a definitive format. The move was a public declaration. This film belongs in the permanent record alongside the work of the most respected filmmakers in cinema history. In 2021, Criterion announced the film would be part of its first ever 4K Ultra HD release slate, confirming that nearly 3 decades later, the film's place in the canon had only become more firmly established. Number 27. The screenplay's original title was different. When the Hughes brothers and Tiger Williams first developed the screenplay, the film carried a different title. It was only through the process of bringing it into production that it became Menace to Society, a title that operates on several levels simultaneously. The title implicates both the characters inside the film and the systems that shaped them. It forces the question the film never stops asking: who exactly is the menace here? Is it Kane? Is it O-Dog? Or is it the society that built the conditions they were born into, failed to address those conditions, and then positioned itself to condemn the people who grew up inside them? The final title captures that central unresolved tension in 4 words. The original title, whatever it was, apparently couldn't carry that weight. Number 28, Entertainment Weekly named it one of the 50 greatest independent films. In a 1997 special supplement distributed to subscribers, Entertainment Weekly named Menace to Society one of the 50 greatest independent films ever made. 4 years after its release, critics and film historians were still placing it among the most important independently produced works in American cinema. Not one of the best hood films, not one of the best black films, one of the 50 best independent films. Full stop. The Hughes brothers were 20 years old when they made it. By 1997, it was already being discussed as a classic. That is the kind of durability that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when something true gets put on screen in a way that refuses to be forgotten.